Project B, the internal rate of return is 5.65, and Project A, the internal rate of return is 7.18. So if we're going to rank these two projects in terms of internal rate of return, Project A wins. It has a higher internal rate of return. For the dollar that we invested in it, it's going to get a higher outcome. What's interesting about this, looking at these on a range of different interest rates, is you can see that there's a point where they cross. So at any interest rate greater than this 4%, Project A is higher, is having a better internal rate of return. At any interest rate below 4%, Project B is actually doing better. So this is giving us as an example as the firm or the government is thinking about what's their background interest rate and how would they decide. If the government interest rate is 2%, Project B is actually having a higher net present value at 2%. So we can read either way. We can take a value of interest rate and read the net present value off it, or we can take a net present value and read the internal rate of return off it. Just ways of looking that they're interrelated. So there's a really interesting example in the end of the chapter about nuclear power plants with some pretty easy to digest numbers. How much does it cost to get electricity from nuclear power? This is interesting for a whole bunch of different reasons. One is which we have 2 nuclear power plants in California, and what should we do with them? We've had a big disaster with a nuclear power plant in Japan. Japan was all in on nuclear power for a long time. They decided to be all out on nuclear power, and that's hundreds of billions of dollars for them. Germany has decided to go all out on nuclear power. France is still all in on nuclear power. And this is a big part of our low carbon future. Nuclear power plants are a low carbon option. Should we be building nuclear power plants to move off of carbon? Anyways, there's a whole bunch of costs, right? This is how much it costs to build it. And interestingly, we'll talk about this. This is how much it's going to cost to unbuild it later. Fuel, so there's only so much uranium in the world. Fortunately, or unfortunately, there's the tiny amount of uranium that we have is far more than we have used yet. And so we have a total cost for building a power plant, $6 billion to build a power plant going forward. There's this decommissioning thing. This is interesting. So the number they used here was $1.8 billion to decommission a nuclear power plant. So a huge amount of money that it's going to take to undo the power plant and safely move the waste away and safely cover it up for the next 1,000 years so that no one can go there and get radiated. But it's 40 years out into the future, and they're using a 10% interest rate. So they took $2 billion in 40 years, and if that's discounted back to now, that ends up being only $40 million. So it got discounted into a much smaller cost. So we have right now, anybody from Orange County, San Onofre, looks familiar? Beautiful beach there, beautiful state park, and camp right on the beach. It's kind of epic. Also, if you ever drive to San Diego, you go basically like 100 feet from it, right? So it's estimated, right? So the power plant just closed last year for good. And that's a very long story we can talk about this power plant closing for good. It's going to cost $4 billion to close it. But they have been collecting funds over the course of the plant for this future eventuality. And they have this much money saved, which is sort of amazing. They have something like $4 billion in some sort of account. And then if you've been following the Fukushima thing, there's wet pool storage and dry cask storage. There's wet and dry storage. So things are for a while in these wet pools, which is what's happened in Fukushima was the pool leaked. Interestingly, like Fukushima, look, where are wet storages? Right next to the ocean. So hopefully someone has $4 billion move it somewhere else. Where are we going to move it to? The federal government hasn't come up with a place for the long-term storage of nuclear waste. When they built this plant, they started putting money into the savings account for the future. There was an idea that the federal government would have a place to send nuclear waste. They've never figured that out. There was a place in Nevada called Yucca Mountain. That's now off. Now there's a place in Arizona, I think, where there's some salt mines. They're thinking that's the next thing. But there was an accident there recently, and they're like, maybe that's not the next thing. So there's some question of money has been paid into a federal fund to build what was going to be Yucca Mountain or whatever was going to be the federal repository. But can they get that money back? Like the federal government doesn't have a place to send things. So can they get this money back and be like, okay, well, if we need to come up with our own way to store things, we need money back from the federal government that we paid into a facility that's not there. I just think they should move the nuclear waste just a little bit further away from the beach. So in the example in the book, then there's an example. It will get you almost a gigawatt of electricity. The value of that electricity would be $745 million. After tax, that would be almost $500 million. We have some sort of exchange rate, so this is going to drive everything, this inflation-adjusted exchange rate. And we're going to have this formula that we had for an annual payment for an annuity, 40 years. This is our annuity, $469 million a year, and then this is the rest of the annuity value that's in your text that I showed in the last lecture. So we're going to get this discounted stream of benefits into year 0 of $6.41 billion. So these have been chosen to match each other, right? The revenue of $6.4 billion versus cost of $6.4 billion. This is this break-even point at net present value equaling 0. And so we can back out of that, different variables. But what's interesting right here is what we have is this electricity cost. And this is something I want to motivate. It's not so much in the book, but I think it's an important policy thing for you guys to know about called levelized cost. So we sum up all the costs and benefits, and at what price of electricity, say we can figure out what a discount rate is, what price of electricity makes sense to have the net present value equal 0. Because we need to make choices about where to get our electricity from. So this thing is called levelized energy cost. You don't have to memorize this formula, but let's just say we're going to sum up the costs, capital cost, maintenance cost, fuel cost. We're going to have a term that discounts them back. And then on the bottom, we're going to have energy. We're going to sum up the amount of energy, the number of megawatts we're going to get out of there. And we're going to have this levelized energy cost, levelized cost of energy. It's sometimes LCOE as well. And it's going to be in dollars per megawatt hour. Or it can be cents per kilowatt hour. This is what I pay, so I like think about cents per kilowatt hour in terms of like something that actually filters through for my bill. In terms of society, like making decisions at the society level, dollars per megawatt hour is how we think about things. But this is all to motivate, we need to plan different sources of electricity production, different types of electricity that's going to feed our grid. So here we can now rank with levelized cost of electricity projections going forward using a base dollar of different types of electricity, right? One thing I want to point out, this is going to come back again, this is energy efficiency. This was that thing that we talked about last time of insulating everybody's doors and houses. So just take note that energy efficiency costs way less than any power plant. And this seems like a cautionary, sort of a figment of like, the professor's just saying this witty thing, but we have gotten so much out of electricity that the energy intensity of our economy hasn't gone up. We're getting a lot out of energy efficiency right now. This is constantly happening. The energy efficiency in each dollar of GDP in the life of each American, it's caused that to stay constant because we're, as the GDP grows and population grows, we're more and more efficient over time. The other part of the story is we have natural gas as the one to beat here, okay? So we're in a fracking boom. We have tons of natural gas right now. The price of natural gas is at historic all-time lows. It's still got carbon, right? It's still fossil fuels. It's cleaner. It has less particulates. It's domestically produced. It's really weird that the colors disappear. Do you see how the color just came back for that one? I wish I could figure that out. See if I circle this, will the color come back? Ah! I have no idea. I wish that I knew what was doing that. Anyways, so we have coal, on here we have coal, nuclear, coal, and then there's a CC. You see the CCS? This is carbon capture and storage, right? We don't have this yet. We don't know how to do carbon capture and storage yet. We need to figure this out. We need to invest billions and billions of dollars to figure this out. But looking towards the future, how can we be reducing the amount of carbon that we produce? We are producing more carbon than anybody in the world. China's about to catch us. Wait, the color went away again? That's so weird. Maybe it just needs me to keep touching it. All right, so we can rank a whole bunch of different kinds of power. What's also interesting in California, we have two things. We're going to put a price on carbon in California. I'll talk about that. We also have a mandate for certain amounts of renewable energy, 20% by 2015. We can talk about that. So we say in California, we need to buy a certain amount. So here's solar thermal. This is the project in the desert with the tortoises. Huge costs, right? This is the highest cost one. This is out by $300 per megawatt hour, which is 30 cents per kilowatt hour. Then, how did it come back? This chart also has with incentives and without incentives. So we get our government involved and we make it easier and we reduce the cost of capital for this company. We can shift the bars lower. The companies, of course, say that they're operating over here. We have photovoltaics, and this is really interesting. So photovoltaics are what people put on their houses. It's a panel the size of this table. There's been a global boom in production. China's got involved. The cost of silicon crystal has plummeted. It's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because the global capacity of doing this is huge. So now they're going to build power plants that are like the same technology that you put on top of your house, but they're going to do it for acres and acres and acres in the Nevada desert. Just a photovoltaic farm in the desert. There's some question whether you track the sun or not, and whether that's worth it. So anyways, we can rank all these different things by their levelized cost of electricity, but we have different policy implications. Who should we be favoring? Are we afraid about nuclear power because what's happened in Japan? Should we not be offering these subsidies that the federal government makes to make nuclear power cheaper? Or is nuclear power the way to go because it's definitely going to get us off of carbon? There's really interesting, this similar data that's put out by the federal government, the Energy Information Administration, and they're the source for the federal government's projections. Dollars per megawatt hour, a few years into the future. Again, on this, the people to beat here at the 6 cents per kilowatt hour is natural gas. Coal, the other baseline. And here's our renewables over here. Here's our renewables over here. They cost a lot more. They can't compete yet on price. So what should we do to encourage them, or what should we do in sort of technology and infrastructure to make them work? There's a table, so they come out with tables, a whole bunch of studies in there, but this is this benefit cost, net present value, taking capital costs, taking future electricity costs, all the things that we've seen today, and people are working hard to generate these estimates. One other term that they use is dispatchable versus non-dispatchable. So wind and solar, you're at the whim of how much sun is falling or how much wind is blowing. Dispatchable, you can turn it on, you can turn it up, you can have it at night, you can have it whenever you want. So we need probably to have some dispatchable and some non-dispatchable. There's small hydro and bigger hydro, but as we have a drought, we're going to have less hydroelectricity this year. Again, the government has these estimates with carbon sequestration, but we don't have carbon sequestration yet, but they're still providing estimates of what they think it's going to cost. Really interesting, though, the government is publishing this data with really beneficial numbers for the natural gas industry. And there's a New York Times article from 2011, this is a little bit old, but the Energy Information Agency, part of the Energy Department, keeps saying there's more and more natural gas. Just as we don't know how many populations of endangered species are out there, we really don't know how much natural gas we have. We're in the middle of a fracking boom, tons of gas is coming out of the ground. The amount of natural gas that we've been able to pull out of the ground has gone up, but we need to plan for our future on 40 and 30-year estimates of how much natural gas there is. And they don't really know. What happens in this kind of thing? So President Obama's all in on natural gas. He'll pose next to the pipeline for natural gas. He's like, the fracking boom is good for him, it's jobs, it's money for the American economy, it's reduced our energy dependence on foreign countries. President Obama's all in on natural gas. But who makes these estimates for the government? They hire companies with contractors who end up having ties to the natural gas industry, who have a benefit in showing like there's a whole bunch of natural gas, everything's going to be fine, let's double down on natural gas because it's a sustainable future. Whereas, so the scandal of this article was there were people in the energy information, sort of the civil servants there, they were like, and they had got a lot of their emails and documents released where they were like, yeah, I don't know, that's what the shale gas people say, that's what the fracking people say the future will be like, but we don't really have those estimates going forward. I think that I am out of time, but we'll continue on talking about this stuff going forward.